This is the lecture where we're going to be looking at the 4 vital elements needed for life. We've already looked at the most powerful way to oxygenate the body. Earlier in the week we looked at the ways you can inhibit oxygen uptake and increase it. We've just looked at exercise, which is the most powerful way to oxygenate the body, which is why you feel so good after exercise. Now we're going to have a look at the 3 last vital elements needed for life. Water is not technically an element, it's more a compound, but for purposes of illustration we call it 4 elements. Our body from the neck down is 75% water, from the neck up we're 85% water. There's no reserve tank on the back, have you noticed? The only water that the body can use is actually the water you put in. And earlier in the week I showed you the breakdown. We urinate out approximately 1.5 litres, our skin 500 mils, from our colon 300 mils, and from our lungs approximately 200 mils. That's a 2.5 litre loss on an average per day. You'd be veering up to almost 3 litres because of the steam bath that you're doing every afternoon. Are you losing a lot? A lot of perspiration is coming out of there. Now, 2 litres must be taken in with pure water every day. The other 500 mils can come in from either juice, if you're on vegetable juices, or coming from the food that you're eating. Not negotiable subject. You've just got to put it in. One of the first symptoms of dehydration is lack of thirst. Isn't that interesting? Now I'm talking about chronic dehydration. If someone's well hydrated and they go a few hours without drinking, they'll get the thirst signal. But if someone's chronically dehydrated, they lose that thirst signal. And what also happens is the saliva gets less. Now when your saliva gets less, your saliva's got antibacterial agents in it which keep in check the microbes that can eat away the enamel of your teeth. So being dehydrated can contribute to dental decay in the mouth. I always say to people, how much water do you drink? And some people say, not enough. Some people say, I don't drink because I'm on the toilet all day. Some people say, I don't drink because my feet swell. Those last 2 answers tell me that the water's not getting into the cell. You've heard that there's been some deaths on the Kokoda Trail, and they're drinking 5 litres of water a day and they're dying of dehydration. The water's not getting into the cell. Let me show you. This is the cell. We've magnified it greatly. And every membrane around every cell is a bilayered membrane. And inside the cell is where the HAPS is. This is where everything happens. Here's your nucleus with the DNA. Here's a little ribosome. Here are the little mitochondria, which are contain the energy cycle inside the cell, just to name a few of what's happening inside the cell. So this is where the water, the salt, the nourishment should happen. And if someone's drinking a lot of water and they're urinating a lot or the feet are swelling, the water's not getting into the cell. Now the main transport system of nutrients and water across the brush border membrane lining the gut and into the cell is the 3rd most vital element needed for life, sodium. Now this is not my opinion. You will find this in any anatomy and physiology book, biology book, chemistry book. That's the 3rd most vital element needed for life. But we need to take sodium into our bodies the way it's found in nature. How is it found in nature? The highest amount of sodium in nature is found in seawater. And seawater contains 92 minerals. The salt that you buy on the supermarket shelf, we'll call it table salt, contains 2 minerals. Whoa, that's sadly deficient, isn't it? And that's one of the big problems with table salt. It's sadly deficient. Seawater with its 92 minerals is called an isotonic solution. It is the exact same mineral proportion and balance as is found in our body. And in the war, in the islands, if a man needed a blood transfusion and they didn't have it, they would infuse him with seawater. I was reading a Nexus magazine, an article by an Australian woman about a year ago. She said, why don't we transfuse with seawater in hospitals? You see, not a lot of safe bloods around now, are there? And you can't sterilise blood or the blood becomes dead. There was a story in the newspaper about a Scottish nurse. She warmed the blood in the microwave and the patient died. Whoa. She changed that molecular structure of the blood so much that it became a poison to the body. I wonder what happens to the food you microwave. Another subject. The salt that we use is Celtic salt. And Celtic salt is a hand-harvested salt, salted in the Celtic Sea, and it contains 82 minerals. It's a lot closer to the 92. Well, where are the other 10? They're in such pico proportion, barely measurable, that it's inevitable that there's a tiny bit of loss when the water's evaporated. What are these two minerals? The two minerals are sodium chloride. In seawater, it's about 30% sodium. In seawater, it's about 50% chloride. Sodium chloride are very harsh minerals and they make up the largest amount of the minerals. So when the water's evaporated from the seawater, the first crystals formed are the sodium chloride. And they make up, what, 80%? So what happens is they just take that, bleach it so it's nice and white, put aluminium in it so it runs freely. That's a dangerous salt. One writer called it a slow poison. It does harden the arteries. It is a very harsh salt and it causes major problems and imbalances in the body. Let me show you how it causes high blood pressure. And it does. The largest concentration of mineral inside the cell is potassium. The largest concentration of minerals outside the cell is sodium. And when someone is putting table salt on everything they eat, have you noticed? You know why? Because these harsh minerals kill the taste buds. So they've got to put more and more and more on. But did you know that Celtic salt awakens the taste buds? Brings out the flavour in the food. So we've got someone that's putting it on every single thing. And they're not having any potassium. Potassium is found in high amounts in all your fresh vegetables and fruit. So what's happening with that person? Sodium levels are going too high, potassium levels are going too low. And with diffusion, osmosis, the highest concentration merges into the lowest concentration. So too much sodium is getting into the cell. When sodium levels in the cell rise, the cell swells. When the cell swells, that causes high blood pressure. And so the person's told, stop the salt. So they stop the salt. Now, the sodium levels in the cell, and there are a little bit of sodium in the cell, when it goes too low, the cell swells. So table salt can cause high blood pressure and no salt can cause high blood pressure. By the way, chloride is what hydrochloric acid is made from. So when someone goes on a salt-free diet, they can start having digestion problems because if they haven't got any chloride, they can't make the hydrochloric acid. That's why the table salt is extreme and no salt is extreme. We're salty people. Our tears are salty, our saliva is salty, our blood's salty. The baby swims in seawater. Did you know that? It's seawater because it's the same mineral balance as is found in seawater. We cry seawater. We haven't tasted our urine, but it is salty. So we need it. A no-salt diet is a mad diet. In the cell, there are sodium-potassium pumps that are constantly working like this to balance the sodium and potassium levels in and out the cell. Because our body runs according to precision balance. What throws it out is when too much sodium is being taken in and potassium levels are being depleted. That's where you get into trouble. Now you know why when I travel I always have a little bottle of Celtic salt and a little bottle of cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper is very high in potassium. It's a great potassium booster. And then all the minerals in the Celtic salt. There are 3 magnesiums in Celtic salt. There is magnesium sulfate, magnesium chloride, and magnesium bromide. They are the 3 magnesiums that are found in the Celtic salt. Do you notice that the salt is very moist? It's very wet. That's because there are 3 magnesiums. Magnesium is a water-hungry molecule, and wherever you see magnesium, the water draws into that area. That's one of the reasons why taking magnesium relaxes your muscles. Magnesium automatically relaxes, but it pulls more water wherever it goes. And so, when you put a crystal of Celtic salt on your tongue and drink a glass of water, that magnesium pulls the water into the cell. It's a water-hungry molecule. If you dissolve the salt in the water, it won't do it because you've dissolved it out. It's got to go on your tongue and then you drink it down. And on the tongue, it's in its concentrated form. You're already absorbing a little bit into the glands under your tongue. In the stomach, it absorbs more. And that magnesium pulls the water straight into the cell. It's a well-documented fact that that is the quickest way to hydrate a dehydrated body. That's why I suggest, especially this week, you've got your morning exercise program, you've got the big sweat at the end of every day, make sure you do it about 3 times a day at least, is to take that Celtic salt and a glass of water. Little children, they won't drink water in the morning. Give them a little crystal of Celtic salt, then they'll drink water. And they love it. They love the salt. And that's all they need to do on the Kokoda Trail. So if you're planning to walk the Kokoda Trail, have a little bag of salt in your pocket. You might need to do it every 2 hours on the Kokoda Trail if you're doing that sort of perspiration. It makes sense, doesn't it? Because we don't perspire out pure water, we perspire out salty water. So the more you perspire, the more you need to replace that salt. A little bit of history for you. Cleopatra found that the slaves worked harder if she gave them salt and water instead of just water. That's because that salt gets that water into the cell and it replaces the electrolytes lost. Your electrolytes are like your elements, your minerals. Any health professional that advises a salt-free diet has forgotten the 4 vital elements needed for life. And granted, table salt is a dangerous salt. Many people go to the other extreme. One lady said, I told my doctor I'm on the mineral salt, and he said, oh no, it's still dangerous, it's still got sodium in it. Well, we need that sodium, but we need it in its balanced form. This is the lining of your gastrointestinal tract. It's got little villi. On this little villi, there's a receptor site, and the glucose that we had for breakfast comes down. It goes into the receptor site, and there's a little carrier in there that carries it through to the blood. But the carrier says, I will not accept you, glucose, unless you come with a molecule of sodium. When the sodium is present, then the carrier will take the glucose through to the cell. Sorry, through to the blood. So if someone's on a salt-free diet and they don't have enough sodium for every molecule of glucose to get in, can you see that some of their glucose will end up in the toilet? I find many people on salt-free diets have a common ailment. It's no energy. No energy because it's not, the glucose isn't getting into the blood, which means it's not even getting into the cell. So we need that salt, but we need the salt in its balanced form. There are a few salts you can get. There's Himalayan salt. It's got about 75 minerals. Hasn't quite got the magnesium. It's not as moist, but it's still a good one. and your macrobiotic salt, and I know the Murray River salt, those pink flakes, they all have the minerals in it. And, you know, different salts have a different mineral amount. If you're not sure what your salt has, ring up the company and ask for a mineral analysis of the salt. Calcium. Calcium, as we looked at the other day, is the king. The gardeners call it the trucker of all nutrients because when calcium gets in, all the other minerals piggyback on the back, but it cannot get into the cell by itself. It needs vitamin E. D. Vitamin D. Vitamin D allows calcium to get into the cell, and when the calcium gets into the cell, all the other minerals piggyback on the back. Glucose. Glucose is the #1 fuel used by every cell in the body, but glucose can't get into the cell by itself. It needs insulin. Insulin increases glucose's ability to get into the cell 30-fold. That's why when the pancreas isn't releasing insulin, the glucose starts to spill out in the urine, and that's what diabetes mellitus means. Glucose or sugar in the urine. Now let me give you a scenario of what happens, sadly, many times. We've got a man, and he doesn't like water because it doesn't taste like anything. He likes a drink to taste strong and good, so he doesn't drink much water. Anyway, when he does drink water, his ankles swell. Because when he does drink water, he's not eating any greens, and you know your greens are your highest source of magnesium. And the salt that he does eat doesn't have any magnesium, so when he does drink, the water's not getting into the cell. He doesn't go out into the sun because he doesn't want to get skin cancer. So the calcium's not getting into the cell. And his body odour is very bad, so he has lots of showers every day, which washes all his oils away anyway, and he's on cholesterol-lowering medication, so the bit of sun he gets, he's not getting any vitamin D. He's on a fat-free diet trying to lose weight, and he loves his 100% fat-free marshmallows. Pancreas is getting overworked, insulin stops being released, and it can't get in. And so the body says, we've got a crisis here. You see, this is where the HAPs are, inside the cell. None of this can get in. So the body says, we've got one more thing up our sleeve. We'll just force it into the cell. What's that called? That's called high blood pressure. Let's list the causes of high blood pressure. Let's put this in through first. Vitamin D, calcium can get in. Insulin, glucose can get in. Let's have a look at the causes of high blood pressure. Causes of high blood pressure can be dehydration. In dehydration, little capillary networks are shut down for full blood volume to keep its fluid volume, and when those little capillary beds shut down, dehydration. It's caused by dehydration, but the little capillary bed shutting down builds up pressure. No salt. No salt causes high blood pressure, and table salt. No salt and table salt are both responsible for the cell swelling, contributing to high blood pressure. What's another cause of dehydration, high blood pressure? No sun. No sun, no vitamin D, no vitamin D, calcium can't get in, no minerals can get in. High carb, high sugar. High sugar, high carbohydrate diet overworks the pancreas, and when the pancreas is overworked, insulin's not released, and so pressure's built up to try and get it into the cell. Margarine. How does margarine cause high blood pressure? Yesterday we looked at fantastic fats, and I showed you how those long-chain fatty acids are all curled up and fit nicely into the cell. But when they're made into margarine, they become straight, and they block receptor sites. They cause all sorts of problems in the body. They're dangerous. Cancer rates have risen since margarine was consumed by Australians. What also causes high blood pressure is inactivity. When you exercise and move that body, it causes the blood to go out to the extremities, which takes pressure off the heart. And when you exercise, you strengthen the heart. And when the heart is strengthened, it pumps much more efficiently or effectively. My son Peter was training for a triathlon. I think he was 24 at the time. And he told me that he was doing 5Ks in 20 minutes, 10Ks in 45 minutes. That's fast. He's a builder. At the time, he was dismantling a vanity unit, the old one, vanity unit that had chipped, slipped out of his hand and hit his foot. Now, his whole foot would have been chopped off if he hadn't had a bone there. Now, apparently, the blood hit the roof. He called out to his brother James, who's a few years older than him. He said, "James," and James apparently said, "I'm on the phone, mate." Pete said, "You'd better come." James told me when he walked into that room, blood was everywhere. See, his resting heart rate was 51 beats per minute. How did he get a resting heart rate like that? Exercise. Because of exercise, his heart muscle was so strong, so effective and efficient, it didn't have to pump much, because every pump gave a blast of blood. So the resting heart rate of 51 beats per minute, the blood hits the roof. If he had had a resting heart rate of 90 beats per minute, it might have just gone to the top of the window. You see that? When they went to the hospital, the nurse kept taking his pulse. They don't see many heart rates of 51 beats per minute in the hospital. Activity. Activity strengthens that heart. And when that heart gets stronger, it doesn't have to beat as much. Even most physicians today acknowledge the importance of exercise in controlling high blood pressure. One other is distress. And when I say distress, I'm talking about constant. Every now and then, we might experience this, but when it's almost non-stop, that can certainly contribute to high blood pressure. Everyone has stress, and our body was designed to deal with stress. And in a well-hydrated, well-exercised, well-mineralised, well-slept body, that body copes with stress. But even that body, when the constant distress comes, if they're not contributing to the running of the body properly, they can certainly go down. We've got to thin the blood. How do we thin the blood? I've helped quite a few people get off their rat poison, warfarin. And you know that's what warfarin does. It causes the rats to bleed to death. They just don't give the people quite as much. There is a much easier way. We've got to keep that blood nice and thin. So what are some natural blood thinners? Yes, well done students, cayenne. Ease yourself into it. I know Patrick thought it very hard at first, but you're getting used to it, aren't you, Patrick?
Half a teaspoon a day.
Half a teaspoon a day. 2 litres of water a day. This is an easy one. Do you know when you start really early, you've got a whole day to get it in? And I say just have it near you and just sip here. That's the only way. I can't drink a whole glass of water. The only time I can do that is when I wake up in the morning or if I've just climbed a mountain. So you just have it near you. The best time to drink it is between the meals, then that doesn't interfere with digestion. If you want to drink with your meal, it's a clear indication you were dehydrated when you sat down to eat. Ideally, you stop half an hour before the meal and you resume about 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours after the meal. If you're thirsty after the meal, a mouthful is not a problem. It's drinking those large amounts just after eating. 2 litres of water in the day. What I do is I usually drink a litre before breakfast, and I easily can because I usually get up about 1.5 hours, 2 hours before I eat, so it's easy to drink the water. And I need it because of my exercise. So if I drink a litre before breakfast, I only have to get another litre done. And I'll often do a couple of glasses between breakfast and lunch, and then a couple after that. You just have it near you.
What was my blood pressure yesterday?
120 on 80, did everyone hear that?
She's very proud of that.
Oh yeah.
Did anybody know?
It's
very proud of that.
Yes.
It's hard work.
It's hard work, that's right. So it's even on camera now, Patrick. Patrick's blood pressure is 120 on 80. The whole world will know now. And that's important because there are a lot of people out there who are battling with blood pressure. Yeah? And these things make a big difference. Ginger. Ginger's a blood thinner. How will you have it? Put it in your foods. Pretty nice. Made those rice wraps nice, didn't it? Also, just grating the ginger, we talked about on the poultice lecture. Grating it and pouring boiling water on it. It's one of my favourite drinks in the winter, is fresh ginger tea. And garlic. A lot of research in the last 10 years showing the wonders of garlic in heart health, blood health, arterial health. And there is a fat. And this fat has 3 double bonds, and it's a very thin, curvy fat, omega-3. So have your chia seeds every morning, have your ground flax seeds, and your walnuts. They're the 3 highest sources of your omega-3s. That's a much more delicious way to get that blood thin, isn't it? And you accompany that with activity. Movement. Movement is life. I've seen many people conquer blood pressure by implementing that. So as you can see, the hydration is essential, but what is also essential as you start to take more water into your body is that you make sure that you're also taking enough salt. And remember, the salt must be taken with all of its minerals. Otherwise, it's a dangerous salt. And it is absolutely a slow poison. But the sodium's important. The whole body needs it to run properly. Your electrolyte balance, your electricity in the body must have that mineral water. I have a book in the library called One of the Body's Many Cries for Water. It's by Dr. Batman Gehaldi. We'll just call him Dr. B. Fascinating book. And he shows the effects of dehydration on the body. And he shows that one of the first places where dehydration is felt is the stomach. We have a thick mucosa lining. The lining of your stomach basically looks like this. All these folds. And these folds have gastric glands around them, like this. And 2/3 of those gastric glands release mucus. And that's the thick mucosa lining that we each have on our stomach. That's why if someone has ulcers or irritation, I give them slippery elm or I give them aloe vera. They both look a little bit like mucus. And that's why some people find it hard to get it down. Just get it down quickly. Your stomach literally purrs when that stuff goes in. And both aloe vera and slippery elm contain growth stimulants and can stimulate rapid healing in the lining of the stomach. So we've got a thick mucosa wall, and mucus is basically 99% water. In dehydration, that's one of the first places that dehydration is felt, because it's one of the first places that the stomach loses its water from. You see, in dehydration, the body goes into a form of drought management, and there is a hormone release called histamine. And histamine helps to manage the water. So it goes into a form of drought management, and histamine is doing the balance. And it controls it, and it takes a little bit of water from here. You remember I just said it'll close down little capillary networks to keep up full blood volume, so it'll take a little bit of water from there to try and keep you alive while the water's not going in. So this is one of the first places. Now in here, in the stomach, mucosa lining, there's sodium bicarbonate. The sodium bicarbonate's there so that if the stomach acid happens to get through, the sodium bicarb neutralises. It's a protection. But in dehydration, when the lining of the stomach is very, very thin, there's no sodium bicarb there. I'll give you a story to illustrate. We had a guy do our program a few years ago. He didn't want to do our program. He was a South African businessman, but his wife had paid the full amount, so he had to come. And in the first consultation, I said to him, "Are you on any medication?" He said, "Yes, I'm on a different antibiotic every month for Helicobacter pylori in my gut." I said, "All right." He said, "I've had gut problems for 25 years. He said, "Last test, the Helicobacter was still there." By the way, what's the definition of insanity? And he'd been doing this for, I think, 5 months, so 5 different courses of antibiotics. I'm not criticising him. He's gone to the experts, and I think they're all hoping the next antibiotic will do it. But remember, we've got to get away from this kill mentality. I said, "Would you like to come off your medication?" He said, "No, I'm very happy with it." I give everyone the choice, and I respect their choice, because I have no authority to take anyone off their medication. Only you and your doctor have. At the end of the first lecture, where I talked about the true cause of disease, where I discussed the body's ability to heal itself, and it will heal itself if you give it the right conditions, he came straight up to me, he and his wife, and they both said, "We'd like to come off our medication." They just heard something that made sense. I said, "Fine, I'll give you some slippery elm every meal to coat and soothe the lining of the gut." At the end of the week, I had a very happy man in front of me. He was bursting to tell me something. I said, "Yes?" He said, "I've had no stomach pain for 3 days. First time in 25 years. Wow. But what he said next excited me the most. He said, "I've worked out my problem." You see, this is the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, the light bulb goes off. Aha, that's me. He said, "I've been drinking a litre of water with every meal." You see, in our initial consultation, I said, "How much water do you drink a day?" He said, "Oh, easy, 2 to 3 litres." So I dismissed the water. He said, "I don't drink any water between meals." What does that mean? Stomach lining's very thin. When the stomach lining's very thin, little holes start to get eaten by the hydrochloric acid. There's no protection and there's no sodium bicarb to neutralise it. Now remember our first meeting, whenever there's cell damage, what happens? The body's own microorganisms evolve into a clean-up team. Bacteria. There's your Helicobacter pylori. See, Helicobacter pylori is in every human being. It's when it's out of control. Well, the question is, why is it out of control? So what's happening is Helicobacter pylori is munching away at this dead tissue. And what happened every time he ate, because this is what he said to me, I just stopped drinking with meals and started drinking between, and I've got no stomach pain. But what was happening before? He had this Helicobacter chomping away, the antibiotics had come in, knock him out, well, just a new team had arise, back on the job. You see that? Every time he'd start to eat, hydrochloric acid would be released. Hydrochloric acid would look down, whoa, we've got some excess bacteria there, we'll wipe them out. But straight after the meal, what would he do? Nice big drink of water. And what would happen to the hydrochloric acid? All its fire's taken out. It's diluted down. Do you remember in chemistry at school, you dilute a chemical, it's not... takes all its strength away. Helicobacter would go, "Whew, that was close." Chomp, chomp, chomp. He came to Misty Mountain. He stopped drinking with his meals. He decided to try to drink between his meals. I tell you, cheap medicine, isn't it? It immediately thickened the mucosal wall. That's one of the first things a water half an hour before a meal will do. It'll thicken that mucosal lining. Still a bit of damage, so Helicobacter pylori is chomping away. He starts to smell lunch. His digestive juices begin. Hydrochloric acid comes forth. Wipe out, wipe out, wipe out. Wow. It's as simple as that. You see, we were designed to heal. And we will heal if you give the body the right conditions. This man was a South African businessman. He'd been all over the world. They'd put him on Nexium, Somac. What does that? Yeah, that stops the gastric acid. What's going to break down your protein now? If you don't turn the tap off, you're still going to be mopping up in the other corner. He was a very happy man. And what did he do? He just stopped drinking between meals and he started drinking, he started to drink between meals and he stopped drinking with his meals. And he said, you know, because I'm hydrated when I sit to eat, I don't feel to drink with the meal. It's such an Aussie habit, isn't it? Every time we sit. One lady said, every time I sit at the meal table, I go for the glass. As you'll see tomorrow, we've got habit pathways in our brain, but you can change those habit pathways. You've heard that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you can. Science is very clear on that today. You can. You can. And basically, if you say you can, you will. And if you say you can't, you won't. Wow, was it that simple? It was. Let's go down the gastrointestinal tract and we come to the pancreas. The pancreas releases 3 enzymes into the gastrointestinal tract, enzymes to finalise carbohydrate digestion, enzymes to finalise fat digestion, enzymes to finalise protein digestion. Did you know that the pancreas is one of the main organs of digestion? More digestion happens there than in the stomach. The stomach, basically, it's just protein. So if you're dehydrated, the pancreas hasn't got the water to make the enzymes. And there are 2 hormones that are released into the blood. And those 2 hormones are glucagon and insulin. And they help balance blood sugar levels. So if you're dehydrated, those hormones aren't going to be released as they should be being released. So dehydration can contribute to diabetes. Dehydration can contribute to poor digestion. Let's come down a little bit further and we come down to the bottom part of the sewage system, I mean the colon. And there it is. There's the appendix, and this is the small intestine that comes into the large. One of the main functions of the large intestine is to take water out, so stools are formed. In a dehydrated state, more water gets taken out than should be taken out. That ends up with rabbit pellets, cement, constipation. One of the easiest ways to ensure that the colon is working well is to make sure you're well hydrated. Remember, the body goes into this form of drought management, and if it needs water, it'll take extra water from here. So very important for colon function to make sure that you are well hydrated. What about the brain? Our brain uses hydroelectricity to work, to send messages. No hydro, very little electricity. No water, the person can even get negative thought patterns happening. But very real, many people are aware of, a dehydrated brain, the cells shrink and that's painful. Michael rang me one day, he was travelling, it was about 2 in the afternoon, he said, I've got a migraine. I can hardly see or think. And my first reaction is, how much water have you drunk today? He said, I drank 2 cups when I woke up, but he said I had no drink between breakfast and lunch. And when you digest a meal, that calls on a lot of water. I said, have a glass of water straight away. He told me later he had a glass of water and the migraine went to a headache. 15 minutes later he had another glass of water and the headache went to a dull headache. He had another glass of water 15 minutes later. So that's 3/4 of an hour, 3 glasses of water. By the time 3/4 of an hour was up, his headache was totally gone. Yes, it was dehydration. So the brain needs it. The joints around your fingers. I can open and close my fingers without pain because there's fluid around the joints that make those joints work with ease. In dehydration, the body can take water from those joints. So dehydration can contribute to arthritis. Arthritis is a very acidic condition, and water is one of the most alkalizing substances you can take in. But I'm warning you, if your body has been dehydrated for a while, when you start drinking water, it probably won't believe you. It's as if it says, sure, I don't believe you. And so the adaptation process that it sets up for dehydration may not immediately disperse. But as the days go by and the body thinks, I think they're serious, I think we can actually relax. So sometimes you'll find the full effect of hydration may not be seen for a few weeks. One lady said to me, I drink quite a lot of water in my cups of tea. Nah. There is water when you make a cup of tea, but because it's got the dehydrating agents of caffeine and tannin and often sugar, it's a dehydrator. So if a person's dehydrated, they drink a cup of tea, they're more dehydrated than before they had their cup of tea. One biochemist said to me, you got to account for, I think he said it was 3 cups of water to every cup of coffee. So if you drink 2 litres of water in a day and have a cup of coffee, you've got to have another 3 to make up for the dehydrating agents in that cup of coffee. Whew. So the water must go in. You just got to find out how to get it in. Now this is a good guide. Take, 1 litre for every 25 kilos of body weight. That's the equation. Having that, it's quite easy to work out children too. You've just got to put it in. Dr. Batman Gahati's story is very interesting. He was a political prisoner in an Indian prison. And all he had was water. So whenever he came across someone who was sick or headache or any problem, he just give them a glass of water. 15 minutes later, he'd give them another glass of water. 15 minutes later, he'd give them another glass of water. What astonished him was that everyone's symptoms started clearing up. He talks about coming across a man who had stomach ulcers and was rolling in pain. He had the Mylanta there and all the usuals, but they weren't doing it. So he gave him a glass of water. 15 minutes he came back, the man was sitting up, he'd stopped groaning. Gave him another glass of water. He came back, the man was standing up. 15 minutes later, gave him another glass of water. Within 3/4 of an hour, the man had absolutely no pain at all. It was just water. Because what water does, it immediately thickens that mucosa wall. He was so excited about what he was finding, he began to document it. After 2 years, he was freed. He said to the authorities, because the government had changed, he said, look, do you mind if I stay a little bit longer? I'm just in the middle of this interesting research. And he has presented his findings at medical conferences. He's written it in medical journals. It's not very popular because the pharmaceutical company can't make any money out of water. But that's a very simple cure, isn't it? Just water. Drink more than you feel like it. Always drink more than you feel like it. Remember Dr. Christopher, if you're drinking too much water and you put your head on the side, it'll come out your ears. A lot of people have said to me, once they started to have that crystal of Celtic salt before they drank the glass of water, they're not visiting the little house quite so often. And that's because the water is now getting into the cell. But the book, The Body's Many Cries for Water, it's one of the most interesting books that I've read. Rebecca, you mentioned it to me yesterday. It's fascinating, isn't it? He goes right down into the little neurotransmitters, right down into the cells. He also goes right down into the bronchioles. This is fascinating. At the end of every bronchiole, there's alveoli. It looks like a bunch of grapes. And this is where the gaseous exchange takes place. So I'll magnify it even more. There's a little capillary network over each alveoli where so when that fills up with oxygen, the blood picks up the oxygen and the blood drops the carbon dioxide and you breathe out the carbon dioxide. Every alveoli has a minuscule droplet of water in it. And because of the surface tension property of water, when I studied as a hairdresser, we had to study surface tension. Now, if you want to know what surface tension is, go and sit by the creek. I hope you all have it sometime this week. It's just wonderful to sit by the creek and watch and listen. And there are little creatures running on the water. And the reason they can run on the water is because of the surface tension of water. If you were to squirt detergent in there, they'd all sink. And of course, that's what you do as a hairdresser. You put shampoo on that cuts the surface tension of the water. And we do it when we're washing the dishes. Because of the surface tension of water, when you breathe out, that little alveoli collapses, which means when you breathe in, you can breathe in a full quota of oxygen. When there's no hydrating happening in the body, some of them hardly have any water at all. And so they can't totally collapse, which means when you breathe in, you can't get your full quota of oxygen. So if your body's not well hydrated, you're not going to be getting the oxygen that you should be getting. There are 300 million alveoli in the human body. It is estimated with one cigarette smoked, an alveoli dies. And those alveoli never regrow once they're gone. Once a person stops smoking, the alveoli stop being destroyed. But what also happens when you smoke, mucus builds up here to try and protect from the poison. Once you stop smoking, that mucus goes, and the little villi that have been all laid down and gummed up with mucus, they start to stand up. Like little hairs they are. And they are constantly pushing the waste up. That's why when someone stops smoking, they can really start coughing. That's a good sign. The waste is coming up. So right down at the cellular level, the body must be fully hydrated. So if you want a fascinating book to read, that's an amazing book to read. One of the Body's Many Cries for Water, Dr. Batman Gaheldi. So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, body doesn't work unless it's well hydrated. It doesn't work and it can't be well hydrated unless it's also well mineralised. And that's where the sodium comes in. One of the most important minerals in the body is sodium. And the best way to take it is as it's found in nature with all the other minerals. Tomorrow we're going to go to headquarters. Fascinating lecture where we go to the brain. And we're going to have a look at the brain, and I'm going to show you how you can rewire your brain right up until the day you die. And I'm going to show you how your brain can get stronger, smarter and more intellectual with age. The human body will deteriorate, but what you've learnt this week will show you how you can slow down the deterioration. But the brain need never deteriorate. Isn't that good news?